David Sharp, summit dreams that cost a man his life. Over 40 climbers walked past a dying man on their way to the top of Mount Everest. They saw him. They knew he was in trouble, and they kept walking. But before you judge them, you need to understand why. Because the answer says something ugly about what Everest has become. This is the story of David Sharp, a British climber who died alone in a cave at 28,000 feet in 2006 while dozens of people passed by. It's a story about summit obsession, commercial pressure, and the moment when chasing a dream becomes more important than saving a human life. And it raises a question that the climbing world still can't answer. On Everest, are we responsible for each other or just ourselves? Who was David Sharp? David Sharp was 34 years old in 2006. British, quiet, obsessed with Everest in a way that's hard to explain unless you've met someone like him. He wasn't rich, he wasn't famous. He was just a guy with a dream that consumed his entire life. This wasn't his first attempt at Everest. He'd tried twice before, in 2003 and 2004. Both times he turned back before reaching the summit. Bad weather, physical problems. The mountain said no, and he listened. But David couldn't let it go. Everest was the thing, the only thing. He saved every penny, lived cheaply, did whatever it took to get back to that mountain. In 2006, he returned for his third attempt. But this time, he did something different. Something that would change everything. He climbed alone. The solo decision. Most Everest climbers join commercial expeditions. You pay somewhere between $30,000 and $100,000 to a guiding company. They provide Sherpas, oxygen, tents, food, route fixing, and, most importantly, someone watching out for you. If you get in trouble, your team is supposed to help. David couldn't afford that. Or maybe he just didn't want it. Instead, he joined a budget expedition called Asian Trekking that cost around $7,000. The deal was simple. They'd get him a permit and basic logistics, but once he was on the mountain, he was on his own. No dedicated Sherpas, no guides, no safety net. This approach is sometimes called underpaying for Everest. You get access to the mountain, but you're essentially a solo climber surrounded by teams that have no responsibility for you. David knew the risks. He accepted them. He wanted the summit badly enough to gamble with his life. The final climb. On the night of May 14, 2006, David Sharp left his high camp and began his summit push. He was climbing the Northeast Ridge route from Tibet, the same route where Francis Arsentiev had died 8 years earlier. The climb went well at first. David made it to the summit sometime in the early morning hours of May 15th. He stood on top of the world. After 3 attempts, he had finally done it, but the summit is only halfway. And David was already in trouble. The descent took too long, way too long. By the time he reached a famous landmark called Green Boots Cave, named after the frozen body of an Indian climber who died there in 1996, David was finished, exhausted, hypothermic, oxygen deprived. He sat down in the cave to rest. He never got up. The parade of climbers. Here's where the story gets uncomfortable. Over the next several hours, an estimated 40 climbers passed by David Sharp as he sat dying in that cave. Some of them were ascending to the summit. Some were descending. All of them saw him. Some thought he was already dead. His body was frozen in a seated position, covered in ice. He looked like just another corpse on the mountain, and there are plenty of those on Everest. But David wasn't dead, not at first. Multiple climbers reported that he was still moving, still alive. One group from a Turkish expedition actually stopped and tried to help. They gave him oxygen. They tried to get him on his feet. But David was too far gone. He couldn't stand. He couldn't walk. After about an hour, they gave up and continued toward the summit. A Sherpa from another expedition later reported speaking to David. He asked him his name and who he was with. David reportedly mumbled, "David Sharp," and "Asian Trekking." But he couldn't move, couldn't help himself. The Sherpa radioed down to base camp, but there was nothing anyone could do. A rescue at that altitude was essentially impossible. By the time the sun set on May 15th, David Sharp was dead. He had frozen to death in Green Boots Cave, just a few hundred meters from safety, while dozens of people walked past. The not my client problem. When news of David's death reached the outside world, it sparked outrage. How could so many people walk past a dying man? What kind of monsters put their summit goals ahead of a human life? The climbing community's response was more complicated. Several expedition leaders defended their team's decisions not to help. Their argument was brutally practical. At 28,000 feet, rescuing an incapacitated climber is nearly impossible. You can't carry someone down from that altitude. The terrain is too steep, the air too thin. Anyone who tries is likely to die themselves. Mark Inglis, a double amputee climber from New Zealand who passed David that day, later said something that became infamous. "We can't rescue everyone on the mountain." Russell Bryce, one of the most experienced Everest operators, went further. He pointed out that David Sharp had chosen to climb without support. He had no team looking out for him. He had made decisions that put him in an impossible situation. It was David Sharp's responsibility to save himself, Bryce argued. The phrase that came to define this mentality was, "not my client." Commercial expeditions are paid to look after their clients, the people who pay $50,000 or more for guided ascents. If you're not their client, you're not their problem. It sounds cold. It is cold. But it's also the reality of how Everest operates today. The Edmund Hillary response. Not everyone accepted this logic. Sir Edmund Hillary, the first person to summit Everest back in 1953, was appalled by what happened to David Sharp. He gave an interview saying that in his day, climbers would have abandoned their summit attempts to help a fellow mountaineer. "Human life is far more important than just getting to the top of a mountain," Hillary said. He called the decision to walk past David horrifying. But here's the thing. When Hillary climbed Everest in 1953, there were maybe 24 people on the entire mountain. Today, on a single summit day, there can be 200 or more. The mountain has become a commercial operation. Climbers pay huge sums of money for their chance at the top. Expedition companies need successful summits to stay in business. Everyone is under pressure to push forward, make the weather window, get their clients up and down. In that environment, stopping to help a stranger isn't just inconvenient. It can mean giving up your one chance at the summit. It can mean losing the money you spent years saving. It can mean watching your lifelong dream disappear. David Sharp's death exposed an uncomfortable truth. Everest isn't really about adventure anymore. It's about money. And when money is on the line, human values get complicated. The ethical question. So who was responsible for David Sharp's death? Was it the climbers who walked past? They made a choice that most of us would call immoral. But they also made a choice that kept them alive. Was it the commercial operators who created a system where strangers have no obligation to help each other? Maybe. But they didn't force David to climb alone. Was it David himself? He chose to climb without support. He chose to take risks that other climbers wouldn't take. He put himself in a situation where rescue was impossible. There's no clean answer. That's what makes this story so disturbing. Everyone involved made rational decisions, and a man still died alone in a cave while the world walked by. The aftermath. David Sharp's death didn't change Everest. The next year, even more climbers showed up. The year after that, even more. The commercial machine keeps running, people keep dying, and the ethical questions remain unanswered. Some expeditions have since adopted policies requiring climbers to help anyone in distress, regardless of team affiliation. Others haven't. There's no universal rule, no governing body, no enforcement. The only thing that really changed is the conversation. After David Sharp, people started talking openly about what Everest had become. A place where your dream might matter more than someone else's life. Maybe that was always true. David Sharp just made it impossible to ignore. If this story made you uncomfortable, The next one is even worse. Watch it now.